As one of the few kids who had a Dreamcast while growing up, my gaming library was quite limited, as you couldn't just find a lot of Dreamcast games being sold out there. I had both Sonic Adventure games, Virtua Striker, Virtua Tennis, and one weird Looney Tunes Mario Kart clone. Released in 2000 for the Dreamcast, Looney Tunes Space Race is a Mario Kart-inspired kart racing game that features Looney Tunes characters competing in chaotic races across different planets. The game features a lot of power-ups akin to those of Mario Kart named gags. They replicate, as the name implies, a lot of the common gags that happen in the Looney Tunes cartoons, making the racing in this game extremely chaotic and possibly rage-inducing. Oh, and extremely loud. On top of the gags, there are also fuel canisters that can be picked up by racers to increase the nitro gauge. Upon filling it up, you can press the nitro boost button to consume all stored canisters and gain significant speed for a short period of time, and not rarely go out of the track, completely nullifying the boost. Looney Tunes Space Race features 4 game modes: Race, Time Trial, Acme Events, and Challenge. In Race mode, a single player or up to 4 players can engage in a singular race with 6 competitors. Time Trials are pretty self-explanatory. The Acme events consist of races with different modifiers, such as anvils falling everywhere during the race. And Challenge mode is a mode where the player can challenge one character to a 1v1 race. The game doesn't feature a tournament mode, which is a pretty weird thing for a racing game to not have. The developers eventually added a tournament mode for the PS2 version of the game, together with new music tracks. But still, that should be a basic feature, and it's wild to think that, even though the game is supposed to be a Mario Kart clone, they didn't include one of its competitors' most basic game modes. The intended gameplay loop is for players to compete in races or beat time trials to get Acme tokens, which in turn are used to unlock Acme events, which unlock gallery content, new characters, stages, and challenges. Acme events loosely tell a story, with its final challenge being the Space Race, which despite all the effort to get to it, it's merely a regular 3-laps race, and beating it unlocks the ending cutscene, with Porky the Pork being the champion, which gets him the prize of getting a bunch of Acme products thrown on his head. The difficulty of the Acme events feel all over the place, with the first one being probably the hardest and most insanity-inducing one, as you keep hearing the sounds of anvils dropping non-stop and are barely able to move a few meters forward before getting struck with one of them. Everything from that point forward feels like a piece of cake. Even the events that could potentially be annoying, such as the one where the only gag is the whole gag. The 2 last Acme events, ironically, are the easiest and most devoid of bullshit ones by far: a time trial and a final race. One thing worth noting is that the game's controls are not necessarily bad, but they are also not particularly great. There is a floaty feel to the steering of the vehicles that isn't too bad, but definitely noticeable when you just pick up the game. The stick is really sensible to the player's input, so you will eventually get into this habit of lightly holding it or tapping it multiple times when getting closer to turns or dodging hazards. Otherwise, you might completely lose control of your character. As for the characters, there are 8 in total: Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Sylvester, Willy Coyote, Elmer Fudd, Yosemite Sam, Porky Pig, and Marvin the Martian. The 2 last ones are unlockable by completing Acme events. For the most part, there really isn't much of a difference between each character, other than on the PS2 version where Willy Coyote and Marvin the Martian can perform jumps, but that is mostly a bug. What is a shame, however, is that while Looney Tunes Space Race has 12 racetracks, only 3 of them are available from the get-go. And it does take quite some time to unlock the 9 ones hidden behind the progression of the Acme events. In a racing game, track variety is one of the most important aspects. So I don't know why the devs thought that it was a good idea to lock 3/3 of them behind progression. What I can confidently say though is that it definitely makes the game look much more bare bones than it actually is. And first impressions are really important for a game. The PSU version has a tournament mode, more maps, and a different soundtrack. Sounds good, right? Well, first off, it looks considerably worse. Blurry and fuzzy, as the game's resolution is lower, and it has a considerable game-breaking bug. By holding down the back view and accelerate button, then letting go of the accelerate button, turning around at nearly 180 degrees, and then hitting the brake button, your character will start racing in reverse. And much like the great big rigs, there is no speed limit when running in reverse. This is an easily replicable bug that causes every race to become trivial. And while we're at it, let me talk about something that I didn't mention previously. This game, in both versions, has some insane levels of rubber banding. It is definitely present and it is noticeable in the Dreamcast version. But it is much clearer when, even though you're racing in reverse, nearing the speed of light, the second that you drop off the map, everyone nearly instantly catches up to you somehow. While Looney Tunes Space Race is fun by itself, it always feels like there is something missing to it. The lack of a tournament mode in the Dreamcast version is a big one. While the PSU version fixes that, the game still feels weirdly amiss. The controls are tolerable but not good enough. The graphics are very unimpressive, but okay for a cartoon-based game made for the Dreamcast. The game has a few unlockables, but none of them feel like they are worth your time. The game modes don't feel interesting enough to be replayed multiple times. The game has some decent racing tracks, but most of them are unlockable by completing challenges and events, which in turn can only be unlocked by completing races and time trials. It feels like the game is constantly coming short of being great. It doesn't help that it is trying to fill in the shoes of Mario Kart 64, which is a gigantic ask. Still, it is hard to sell a game that came out 4 years after its competitor and couldn't even beat it in any aspects. This game always felt to me like it would be great for kids that never played Mario Kart, but as soon as they showed it to a friend that experienced that game, they would look at this and say, "Man, this sucks." And it's funny to think that this wouldn't be the last time that Warner Brothers would try to make their own version of a popular Nintendo game and end up failing at matching their competitor. In a way, Looney Tunes Space Race was the writing on the wall for Multiversus. Multiversus was Warner Brothers' attempt at replicating the success of Nintendo's Smash Bros. Series after Smash Bros. Ultimate was a massive hit. Warner betted that by using characters from their IP, putting them all together in a free-to-play Smash-like game, that they could achieve similar commercial success to Nintendo. When the game had an open beta in 2022, it was initially successful, but then it lost reportedly 99% of its player base within months. In 2023, it was shut down with the devs intending to rebuild the game engine from the ground up, improving the netcode, and reworking the game's progression system. It was then unceremoniously officially launched in 2024, and while it did garner some public attention, again, it lost most of its player base and was shut down 1 year after. While Warner Brothers greedily pumping microtransactions at every corner of the game since the beta was a contributing factor as to why Multiversus met its demise, the most important reason as to why it failed was that the game was just not good enough. From its inception until it being shut down, Multiversus always felt like a cheap knockoff, a game that would be fun checking out for a day and that was it. What Warner failed to realize is that Smash Bros. Isn't successful merely because of its characters, the crazy crossovers that Sakurai probably had to sell his soul to the devil and give one of his pinkies to the Yakuza to make them happen. The game is, like it or not, good, well made, fun to play. Look, I'm not a Nintendo guy and I'll leave at that before they send out the ninjas after me. But I'd be damned if I told you that I wasn't hyped up for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I even tried to arrange as often as possible to play the game with a friend who owned a Switch. Now Multiversus? I could barely bother to even download the game, let alone play it for more than 5 minutes. Likewise, Looney Tunes Space Race ends up feeling like a Mario Kart at home. The game is not as good or fun as its competitor. It was created in an attempt to replicate the commercial success of another game, and that ended up harming the game more than helping it, as it had to inevitably try to live up to the impossible expectation of matching its competition. And because of that, the game ended up feeling less unique and interesting, easily dismissible as simply a forgettable copycat at a first glance. While that should have been a lesson to Warner, clearly they didn't learn the first time around. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe and leave a comment. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.